Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. Here it is, the coveted top 10 programming languages to learn in 2017. Just a little bit of background behind myself. I've been a software developer for about seven or 8 years now. So I've been doing enterprise development for quite some time. I also created a top 10 list of programming languages to learn last year for 2016. And in that process, the videos received close to roughly 700,000 views or so, with thousands upon thousands of comments from the programming community. So I did a lot more research into this year's list compared to last year's list. So I hope that this will appease a lot of the different industries that are blossoming out there. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that this is still the top 10 programming languages. So this isn't about like, okay, the top 10 newest languages or top 10 that doesn't, that competes with our modern day programming. This is about what are the top 10 languages to learn this year. And that is for jobs, for money, for building new things. So, we could always have this topic all day, we could argue about this all day long, but let me just get into the list now. Number one, or number 10, I'm starting from the back to the front. We're going to go with Haskell. So I said if you're going to go functional, you might as well go with Haskell. Haskell is a purely functional language. Everything is built with functions. Functions call other functions. Functions are, everything is immutable. So immutable makes functions reliable, and you never have any sort of shared state and things like that. So a lot of things that end up biting you with a shared state system for multi-threading. And if you create a proper Haskell program, you're going to have blazingly quick application. You're going to be able to crunch a lot of numbers. So Haskell's been around for a very long time. An honorable mention would go to Scala, F#, and Clojure. You could probably add maybe Elixir and a couple of other ones as well. But if you were going to pick a functional language to add to this list, I really think that Haskell fits the bill because it is purely functional and is going to teach you proper functional fundamentals, if compared to some of those other languages that I mentioned that are not entirely purely functional. Number 9 on the list is assembler language, or ASM for short. So we're seeing ASM return to the browser. We're seeing a lot of people go back to assembly. Assembly is the lowest of all programming languages out there for your computer. Lower level means that it's closer to the hardware. You're going to be able to tweak things on the computer that higher level languages will just not let you have access to. It also means that you're going to spend a lot of time writing ones and zeros and pointers, and it's going to be a very, very complex process of being able to build complicated machinery and programming languages that may arise out of the assembler language. However, if you are going to push the envelope of what's possible with programming, assembler is going to be the go-to language to do that. So we're going to continue to see some of the smartest individuals writing assembler code out there. Number 8, we have Go, which is the Go programming language, or also known as Golang. Ken Thompson, one of the founders or the creator of the B programming language back in the late 60s or early 70s, I'm not sure what date that is, he helped design the Go programming language. Ultimately, it arose out of Google's project. And Google, when it was first getting started, actually used Python for its stack. So the first Google search engine was using Python. Eventually, they ended up having to do a lot of data crunching with a faster static type language, which gave rise to like C and C++, at least at Google's operations, to be able to parse through their massive amounts of data. Because Google wanted a better way of getting developers on the same page and writing code that each could understand much easier, but also be extremely powerful and be built with concurrency in mind. Go was created for that reason, and Python is Python and C++. I mean, some of that old Google code is being replaced with the Go programming language code. Not all of it. I mean, there's still quite a bit of code that you're going to see with those other languages, but Go is going to continue to rise in popularity because anytime you have a company with as much influence as Google, you're definitely going to do good. So continue to see Go rise in 2017. It's somewhat of a slow rise since it's been out for a few years now, but it's definitely a language worth picking up. The next one is number 7, C++. So C++ is built on top of C, which is the Don or the godfather of all programming languages. So C++ still powers many games, GUI applications. When it comes to game engines and things like that, you're going to see a lot of libraries in C# and Python that are just ported from C++ libraries. So if you needed to push the envelope of what those frameworks and engines are doing, you have to know how to use C++. C++ is the language of choice that you're going to use if you get into the game development with Unreal Engine. And it's a language that goes back all the way to the 80s. It's been around for a very long time. Somewhat of a bad rap depending on who you ask. A lot of things have been tacked onto the C++ language, but there has been a resurgence in its popularity over the last, I would say, 10 years. It never really left, but for the longest time, people were saying, "Oh, well, this or that is going to do away with C++, and eventually we won't need C++ anymore." And that's just not the case. It's still going to continue to be around. There's still quite a bit of jobs using C++, and just continue to see that into 2017. Number 6, this is somewhat of a surprise listing if you watched the video from last year. TypeScript is being mentioned, not even in the top 10, but also at number 6. So that gives it a lot of credence compared to, you're probably like, well, TypeScript, TypeScript is bringing type safety to JavaScript. JavaScript is the language for the browser. The older JavaScript standard there was no block scoping. You had all kinds of you can consider JavaScript a functional language. Some people will tell you it's not a functional language, but an argument can be made either way. But JavaScript allows you to do a lot of things like passing in JavaScript functions as a first-class citizen. Also, the fact that you don't know what types are being returned from JavaScript functions just by looking at them. So if you have a statically typed programming language like C++ or Java or C#, you can clearly look at a method and understand what type you're going to be getting back. With JavaScript, it's not the case. You can concatenate it all into one line and you have no idea what's going on without the painstaking process of stepping through it. So it makes things very difficult to work on if you have large development teams. You can ask any large development team, JavaScript is not as easy to be on the same page with as compared to something like C#. So this has given rise to languages built on top of JavaScript which get compiled down to raw JavaScript. We've seen it if you look at what React is doing with JSX, or you see with CoffeeScript. But when you look at all those different flavors of what's being done here, TypeScript is definitely the number one. Overall, those guys, number one, and mainly the main reason for that is because Google has even ditched JavaScript in favor of TypeScript for the new Angular 2.0 project. All the documentation for Angular 2.0 are being done in TypeScript. TypeScript is going to allow you to understand what your functions are returning. Another thing, too, is it was actually designed by Anders Hellsberg, who's the creator of the the C# programming language. And he's an extremely smart, definitely a genius when it comes to language design. C# is a fantastic language, and TypeScript is built in the same flavor. So it makes JavaScript quite a bit better to deal with. And I think that we're going to see it emerge as the top JavaScript preprocessor. Number 5 is Swift. Apple is doing away with their Objective-C. So whenever you thought of Apple, you've always thought of Objective-C, and some people will still tell you that you think of an Objective-C. But Objective-C isn't going to make the top 10 in this list. It's going to be replaced instead by Swift. And instead of Swift being further down the list like it was last year, Swift is going to move up. It's going to be one of the most popular languages on the TOB index. It's going to continue to rise as more and more Apple developers switch over to the Swift language. There's a lot of legacy code out there that's all written in Objective-C, but eventually we're going to see much more Swift out there, and that's going to be all these Apple developers know. So I would think that we're still going to get a lot of growth here in the next few years for Swift. Number 4 is Python. It's going to take one step down, as we're going to see of these compared to these other languages. But Python is a great first language. It's been rising in popularity for the last 10 years. It's been a popular language for the past 30 years. Since Google's used it for the longest time and it powers YouTube, and there's so many other things that you can do with Python, I could talk about it all day long. In fact, Python is now the #1 most taught programming language of all IT schools in the entire United States. And we're talking about some of the greatest schools like MIT and Stanford and Carnegie Mellon and all these other great schools. They're teaching Python because Python is open source. It's easy to pick up as a first language. It doesn't burn people out with its static type checking and stuff like that. So Python is a dynamically interpreted duck type language, and you'll have to read up more on that. I have plenty of videos, by the way, on that if you're interested. But Python is a great language to learn if you want to get into robotics or bioinformatics or just mathematical computations. If you want to get into some basic gaming, and definitely web development with Django. Django powers sites like Instagram and Pinterest and Reddit.com, and not to mention YouTube again. So Python is going to be a continuous, it's going to continue to grow. And it being #4 on this list, and I believe #3 on the list last year, Python is an absolutely fantastic language, and it definitely should be learned, even by experienced programmers. #3 is Java, not to be confused with JavaScript. This is a powerful static type language, and it's ruled the job market for decades now. So if you look at, okay, I want to get a job, and how do I get into a corporate, at least corporate enterprise development, Java has ruled that market for quite some time. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon. I don't think it's now like the flavor of the month type of thing. It's not like everybody's like, oh, I love Java, I want to jump into the Java train. But Java is somewhat of a necessity. There's so much code out there. There's so much opportunity. If you're a good Java developer, you should be able to find a job a little bit easier than I think than if you were to be a Python or a PHP or a Perl developer for sure. So Java is also the language of choice for the Android framework. So if you want to do a lot of Android development, Java and Android kind of go hand in hand. So we're going to continue to see Java rule the market. So if you're looking for a language and you haven't learned Java, you're definitely not wasting your time learning it. #2 is JavaScript. This was the #1 language last year on the list. So this one, this is the only agreed upon language of the web browser. For so long, we've heard of languages like ASM.js, so we're going to hear about how Dart.js is going to be the new language of the browser. But the thing is JavaScript keeps getting better. The newest JavaScript 6.0 standards, also known as ECMAScript 2015, has a lot of things like lexical scoping, and it has like using the let variables. It has promises, module importing. There's going to be a lot of stuff that JavaScript is bringing to the table, and JavaScript 7 is going to promise to bring even more stuff. So as the JavaScript language matures, we're seeing some of its voids being filled with its newer releases. So we're seeing languages like TypeScript pop up to try to fill some of the void that JavaScript brings. But the fact of the matter is JavaScript is going to be, it's not going anywhere. It's if you want to be a web developer, you have to know JavaScript. You absolutely have to know it. You're going to see TypeScript probably a rise in popularity because of the shortcomings of some of the things that JavaScript does, especially dating back a few years ago. But watch, those deficiencies shore up, and JavaScript continue to be a popular language for web development. The only thing that JavaScript isn't really going to do, because it would change the way JavaScript works and operates, is that it's never going to be a type-safe language. So with TypeScript, that's why it brings this type safety to JavaScript, and that's why I really think that TypeScript is not going to be really replaced by JavaScript. I think that they're going to both be pretty important hand in hand. The final and #1 on this list is the C# language. Now, to all you non-Microsoft developers out there, you're probably going to be like, oh, Microsoft fanboy, blah, blah, blah. But if you guys know me and you know my videos, I've been harping on Python and Django since I started development. I love Python. I love Django. I've gotten into Go. I've done some Rust tutorials. I've done all kinds of stuff. But you have to give the nod to C# this year because of some of the things that the new CEO, Satya Nadella, at Microsoft has done. He's open sourced the C# language itself. He's open sourced the proprietary Visual Studio integrated development environment for writing code. We're seeing the the Azure cloud environment start to take more and more business. Like many Fortune 500s and Fortune 100s are now putting their application stacks on the Microsoft cloud. Microsoft recently bought LinkedIn. They bought Xamarin, which Xamarin is a billion-dollar platform that is used to be able to write mobile apps using C plus or Objective C, or mobile apps for Android or Apple or even the Windows Phone. You can do all of that stuff in Xamarin. It's also the language of choice behind the Unity game engine. So with Microsoft sitting on nearly $100 billion in cash and going out and buying companies like LinkedIn for 20-some billion dollars, they are going to continue to be a force. And even where they haven't competed due to really turning their back on some of the development community over the last 10 to 15 years, maybe longer, they're starting to gain some of that back. And they have so much money and so much influence that they're able to pretty much buy their way into areas that they really couldn't compete just on the simple fact of programmer love. So C# will make the number one on this list. All I would say the top 5 of these languages, I mean, you cannot go wrong with any one of them. But if you're looking for a language to learn, and any one on this list, I don't think you're going to be wasting your time at all in 2017. All right, guys, let the comments begin. Let me know what you think. And here's to 2017.